Good evening, friends. The JASA Program Committee is delighted to celebrate the Brooklyn Museum's new exhibition of Hiroshige's 100 Famous Views of Edo, with new photographs by Alex Bueno and new versions of the original views by Takashi Murakami that will be on view at the Brooklyn Museum from April 5th to August 4, 2024. The Meisho Edo Hyake is a series of woodblock prints by the renowned artist Utagawa Hiroshige and published in Edo, or Tokyo, from 1856 to 59, with 118 designs, plus a frontispiece and several designs following his death by Hiroshige II. The Brooklyn Museum set is considered one of the finest deluxe and complete editions, but there have been complete sets that have been dispersed even in our lifetime. And two of the finest sets known are in Japan, including one in the Ota Memorial Museum in Tokyo. This set came to the Brooklyn Museum in 1933, but was only rediscovered in 1970, when I had the good fortune as a junior curator to find it lying on a bookshelf in a bound album in the museum's library. Some years later, a donor, Gary Smith, was the first to notice a penciled label on one of the prints mentioning Anna Faris, and that started a decades-long study to get to know who she was and to opine on how she may have received the series. This was only learned after the last exhibition of the Meisho Edo Hyake at the Brooklyn Museum in 2000, when the Yomiuri America newspaper asked in a feature article, "Who is Anna Faris?" The rest is history. The Faris family were leaders of the Dutch Reformed Church that brought Japanese students to America to study at the colleges they founded, including Rutgers in New Brunswick, among others. They later founded the Faris Jogakuin that remains today as a girls' school in Yokohama. Tonight, we have invited three speakers to bring attention to key aspects of this print series: understanding its meaning and impact, viewing the prints in a wonderful new exhibition, the first in a generation, and introducing Alex Bueno's striking images with a contemporary vantage point of Hiroshige's views. Many in our audience will recall the outstanding publication by Henry Smith, published by the renowned art publisher George Braziller in 1986 and subsequent editions. Henry Smith is an incredible bibliophile and historian who has focused much of his studies on the arts and new artistic methods introduced in the Edo period. Perhaps he is most well known for his legends, as George Braziller called them, which make up the narrative texts of the publication. We look forward to bringing these ideas and other ways that we can enjoy and interpret this signature series of Japanese woodblock prints, and welcome you, Henry, this evening. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me all?
Yes.
Okay, super. Amy Poster asked me to first describe my approach to the 100 Famous Views of Edo when she actually, on behalf of George Braziller, asked me to write the commentaries. And I thought the reading was the best term to describe my approach. I think that these pictures can be read both as a text and as a picture. And so that's it seems simple-minded, but that's what I've tried to do. I want to just quickly go back and explain how I got to my interest in Hiroshige and in this particular series. It really all goes back to my time in Japan in 1973, 72-3, when I was on leave from Princeton University and had a research project to study the history, the cultural history of the city of Edo. And then I had a year of leave at Cornell University in 1974, 75. And that was really fairly decisive. In the earlier, I should back up a little bit. My first trip in 1972, 73 on leave, I met Peter Gluck, an architect. His wife, Carol, is very well known, of course. And he really got me interested in how to look at the city. And we also met with Taki Koji. We did an article in A&U magazine and produced this exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in the winter of 1975-76. And it was a great success. And it will be restaged, as a matter of fact, after 50 years by an effort by Jordan Sand right now in Tokyo, not reproducing the same thing, but reimagining how we see and experience the city. So that was the basic idea. I have gone back and found some documentary evidence of how my own particular interest in the 100 Views evolved. And this is from the spring of 1976, when Karen Brazel began to organize a project on time and space in Japanese aesthetics. This was a real trigger for me to think about the relationship between time and space. And this is my own notes for a talk that I gave at Cornell. I spent a year at Cornell in 1974, 75, 76 rather. And here's my very first talk, an outline of a talk dated March 8th, 1976. And as you'll see down below, I don't know if you can see it here, but I was grappling with the nature of perspective, how space is depicted in pictures. This is an incredibly complicated issue, but I was going into very basic things you can see here. What is the Chinese landscape tradition? What is the Japanese landscape tradition? I was trying to think this all through. And the next thing I knew was this is the contract with George Braziller, dated October 15th, 1985. Amy Poster had called me, I'm sorry, here, let me back. Amy Poster had called me about a week or two before this and asked if I would be willing to write the commentaries for this edition that George Braziller wished to put out. I remember very well, I was in my bedroom with my wife, Kimie, and Amy asked, apparently now I realize at the recommendation of Roger Keyes, would I do this? And I said, yes, of course I would do it. Then the group that Karen organized met the next January 1977 in Maui. And you can see from this what I was trying to do. I was trying to write a synthetic view of exactly what perspective was: the Chinese model, the Japanese model, the Western import, and the synthesis in late Tokugawa. And that synthesis was basically Hiroshige. After the book appeared, the very first of several reviews that came out was one that I remember Amy sent me a copy of this by Kirk Varnado, late, great art historian, who wrote this, to me, very flattering review, but also very insightful. He really seemed to understand what was going on with this. And the example that he gave that you see here, this is Naito Shinjuku. This is Shinjuku, not exactly the location of the current Shinjuku, but about Shinjuku Sanchome now. And what Kirk Varnado did, he talked about the confusion of the feet of the horses here. And he noted how many, he said it was confusing. And I had thought about this myself. How many horses are there here? And I finally figured out that there are two horses, and that this horse that we see from the buttocks here is actually oriented to the right. So that horse only has three of its hoofs. And the others are from the other horse, the four here, and then of the groom that is holding it. At any rate, Kirk Vonnegut then at the introduction to his hold on just a second. So, well, I'm sorry. I'm just going to go back to this. So, what he wrote then was horse shit. That's what Hiroshige shoves under our noses in the extreme foreground of his view of Shinjuku. And unfortunately, I can't. I have to go back to the other one here. Worse, half the scene in this woodblock print is dominated by a close-up view of the offending horse's ass. From a maggot's viewpoint of view, we look under the proscenium crotch in front of the forest legs that wittily confuses at least two horses and one man. So let me not dwell on that, but move on to the appearance of the book itself. And number 3, Hibiya Soto Sakura, is a very important view because of the wittiness of what is depicted here, and it shows what Hiroshige was trying to do, and that is to capture time within space. And so you see here in a detail, well, this detail is not so great. This is a game being played. It's a battledore and shuttlecock sort of game with these two paddles on right and left, and in the middle of the air is the shuttlecock. This is an old game, Hagoita in Japanese. And you can even tell that it's actually traveling from the left to the right, if you look at it closely. So this capturing of time was really essential to his whole project. Yeah, okay, here you see the detail of it. And this print was also critical because, as Amy has mentioned, this had the telltale inscription, October 1930, gift from Miss Anna Ferris. And that's what led to the identification of the donor. I want to just show you now a few of a series of images from the series that show the kind of thing that the stories that he wanted to tell. Kirk Vonnegut called it compressed novellas in many of these. This is one of which I'm particularly fond. It's a screensaver on my iPhone. Number 73, The City Flourishing Tanabata Festival, Tanabata Matsuri. And what is interesting here is that if you look in the down in the corner here, I hope you can see this. I'm just trying. Okay, yeah, there we go. If you look down in the corner, it shows basically Hiroshige's own home, and the blue garment hanging over a drying rack to the lower right is where he lived. He was a fireman, had samurai status, and this telling of his own personal story on Tanabata and the title of the city, Shichuhai, the city flourishing, shows his tremendous pride in the city itself. Just hold on. An influence, I just want to quickly run through some influences on Hiroshige. One was Hokusai. This is the Hokusai 100 Views of Mount Fuji, which George Baziller asked me to write right after Hiroshige. And in that, he has this wonderful depiction of drying cloth at Konyacho, the drying district in Edo. And you see a pole here, which is lifting up the cloth to put over the bamboo drying pole. And this is the kind of thing that precedes Hiroshige in many important ways. Here is a different sort of print. This is a scene inside a place of entertainment where you see the silhouette of a geisha to the right here and her robes disrobing, and the remnants of a meal afterwards. I also wanted to mention the work of Harashida Minoru, a very good friend. The scene here is of the entrance to Asakusa Kannon, the great temple, still such. The lantern is still there. Minoru was very important to me as with the Hiroshige project, but also from an early point, just studying the history of the city of Edo, Tokyo. And on the right is the cover of a book that he wrote called Nazo Toki Hiroshige Edo Hyaku, solving the riddles of Hiroshige's 100 views of Edo. And I can't get into the details now, but when Minoru wrote this, he was dying of cancer, so he never saw the book itself published. But he had a very interesting idea that what Hiroshige was trying to do was to express the city in need of salvation because of the Ansei earthquake several years before, which devastated the city. So his theory was that Hiroshige was really trying to provide a solace in the 100 views. Whether this is true or not, I can't say, but the whole notion that, and to write a whole book on the idea that he was saving the city. This is another comparison that I am very fond of. If you look closely at the Braziller volume, you'll see that many of Hiroshige's views stemmed from an earlier series that he had done called the Ehon Edo Miyage. And on the left, you see a detail from one of these. On the right is the version that this evolved into in the 100 views. And what to me was intriguing, I've written about this at some length, was that in the view to the left here, you can see these different monuments within this. This was a plum garden around Kamata in the southern part of Edo. And you see people enjoying themselves in the plum garden. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 stone monuments to who knows what. When Hiroshige then turned this into, on the right, a vertical print now in the 100 Views of Edo, what you will see is that he has twisted the viewpoint so that he's moved sort of to the left, so that each one of these monuments is now hidden by a tree. This is an effect that I call cinematic, and it shows an acute sense of time. So I think that Hiroshige was not anticipating cinema in any way, but he was incorporating a kind of movement into the picture that was absolutely unique, and this is a remarkable example of it. Just quickly to rehearse, and I'm nearing an end here, the whole history of the introduction of Western perspective. It began via Chinese prints, actually, in the 1740s with these pictures called uki-e. This is often translated, so it's this dramatically exaggerated linear perspective for the inside scene, and in the distance, a traditional non-perspectival scene. The word uki-e is often translated as floating pictures, but I don't think that's what it means. Uku means to come to the surface come to the top of a flat surface. Normally it's water. Here it is the vertical space that we see. So they're popping out pictures by my interpretation. The whole playing with perspective and composition begins with the Akita Ranga school. Here is a famous portrait picture where you see this near far kind of juxtaposition that derives from Dutch paintings, but also the use of a tree to the right as sort of a border. And Hiroshige played with this in his own early views of Edo. You see this sort of a cut-off boat type of composition that he used. And then also the vertical format has its precedence in bird and flower prints of this sort, where you see a bird on a post with a distance, with a landscape in the distance. And another issue was framing, playing with frames of this sort. Eisenstein, in a famous essay entitled, he frames a shot, used this, and this was part of Hiroshige's vision. So it's this cinematic quality that you see. This is a remarkable image preceding the 100 views. But what you see, this is a long row of daimyo, yashiki daimyo mansions in the distance. And to the right, cut off from the vision but projecting out, are two shops, one selling lanterns on the top right here, and one other one was selling umbrellas. This kind of cutting things off finds some of its origins in images like this. I jump now to a series of light boxes that were made by Cynthia Alsworthy that were on display at an organization, at an exhibition organized by the Minneapolis Institute of Art. And here you see one of these is of one particular image within the 100 views. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, sorry, hold on. Here on the left, you see the original. This is a scene of, I think I've mentioned this before, of a scene of entertainment. After the entertainment, it tells a story, as so many of these images do, and there are all the leftovers on the table here. The geisha is now probably preparing for what follows, but Cynthia Alsworthy on the right completely reinterpreted this. And I was flattered to know that she replaced the stuff on the left with an image of none other than Braziller's volume open to that particular scene. I think Alex will begin with talking about some of this. Finally, let me just mention the singularity of Hiroshige's series. It was a one-off thing. No one ever imitated it. It was absolutely unique to his times, and I think expressed his whole sense of the need for composure and revival in a very, very politically fraught set of circumstances in the Bakumatsu period. Perry had already arrived when Hiroshige did the series, and he died just before about 10 years before the Meiji Restoration. So it was an aim to be composed. On the right, however, is more than 10, 15 years later, the artist Kobayashi Kiyochika, about whom I was writing a book just after the 100 Views project was finished, did this sort of homage to Hiroshige, where he shows mimicking the cartouches on the upper left, and the same scene of carrying a bucket of bonito, the hatsugatsuo, in the springtime. But there's a comic thing. It's the same idea, but it is nothing but an homage to Hiroshige. So I just threw this in here because we will be talking about Murakami Tadashi and his project there. And let me just end with a in memoriam to three people who were most influential to me. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Henry.
Yeah, sorry. Did I go over time? Probably.
Thank you so much, Henry. We really welcome your thoughts today, and it's such an honor that you're here with us together speaking about this singular series and your vantage point on it. I'm happy to now introduce Joan Cummins, the Lisa and Bernard Sells Curator of Asian Art at the Brooklyn Museum. Joan recently completed a long-term project to reinstall the galleries of Asian art in the museum. We're delighted that she has expanded her focus from South Asia, Korea, and China to Japan, and has recently curated Porcelains in the Mist, the Kondo family of ceramicists, on view in the Arts of Japan Gallery through December 8th of this year. She has also developed a new way to view the series, one not attempted in the 3 previous installations during my tenure. And tonight we've invited Joan to introduce Hiroshige's 100 Famous Views of Edo and new ways of looking at the moment in time and the impact of his art today. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you so much, Amy. And hello, everybody. I'm delighted to introduce Brooklyn's new exhibition, which opens on Friday. I was in the gallery just now, and I have to say that even if you have seen Hiroshige's before, or good Hiroshige's, there is something very special about being surrounded by 118 of them, especially when they're as nice as Brooklyn's. I'm going to give you the very briefest introduction to the exhibition, and I hope this tempts you to make the trip to Brooklyn to have a look before we close on August 4th. Okay, let's see. My arrows didn't make it go forward. There we go. Okay. There are many ways to talk about this series, as Henry began to note. Later this spring, JASA is going to hear from Andreas Marx about his beautiful new book on the same series. And you'll see that he takes a very different approach. For this show, I have mostly focused on Hiroshige's subject, the city of Edo, and what the artist wanted us to know about his hometown. This is not to say that I downplay the beauty and vibrancy of the prints. I do talk about Hiroshige's radical compositions. The most interesting ones have irreverent cropping or big foreground objects that interrupt the view as much as they frame it. But as we'll see, I mostly discuss these compositions not as a formal quality, but as a way of depositing the viewer in Edo. So in doing this, I have chosen to take a very Henry Smith informed approach to the series, looking at what these views meant to Hiroshige and his Japanese audience. I've drawn heavily on the rich repository of information in the book that he and Amy released in 1986. I do point out beautiful features on the prints, like the incredible diagonals and wintry sky that distinguish the Fukugawa lumberyards composition that's on the right. But a lot of the interpretation in the show is really more urban history than art history. So for this print, we also talk about the importance of the lumber industry in Edo, which was a city of wood-framed buildings. A booming population and frequent fires meant that there were construction projects going on at all times in the city. We also talk about the need to store lumber in or near a waterway, both for fire prevention and for transport. So the show is full of fun facts in labels accompanying each print. But today I'm going to talk about some broader themes because unlike most of the people here on the webinar today, the average Brooklyn Museum visitor has really never thought about Japanese prints. So I started this project by putting myself in their shoes, trying to remember what I found puzzling when I first encountered the series. The first question I asked myself was what was special about Hiroshige's series? Japanese artists had been illustrating sites around Edo since the city's founding. So what did Hiroshige bring that was new? In the introductory area of the exhibition, I juxtaposed 2 of Hiroshige's prints with 2 prints from an earlier Views of Edo series by Kitao Shigemasa. These date to about 1770, and I'm showing one of these pairings here. Shigemasa's depictions of must-visit attractions in Edo usually place the famous building or bridge at the center of the composition. And he adds a few peripheral details around that capture the site's character. So here on the left, we have his image of the shrine at the top of Atagayama, a site that's just a couple of blocks east of the Okura Hotel. The most famous feature of this site is the steep stairway leading up to it. Shigemasa adds a band of clouds to show us that it's a big climb. You're going to climb through some clouds here. Not really. Hiroshige's depiction of the same site on the right could not be more different than his predecessors. Hiroshige has us standing at the top of the hill. Our backs are to the shrine and we're looking out at the city. We are on Mount Atagayama instead of looking at it from a distance. We know that the stairs are there only because we see people coming up. And we know that, the dramatic difference in height between the front figure and those behind him tell us just how steep those steps are. Where Hiroshige places us, we're participants rather than bystanders. A savvy viewer would look at this print and feel out of breath just looking at it, thinking about what it's like to climb those stairs. Often when we get drastic cropping or big foreground elements in Hiroshige's compositions, they serve to bring us into the scene. Hiroshige's Edo series makes the viewer an insider. And this is one of the big themes of the show. He illustrates the city as it was experienced from day to day, not as it appears in iconic picture postcard views. This approach is geared toward veteran Edoites, probably more than country folks with Edo dreams. So, aware that my audience is mostly Brooklynites, I have pitched the interpretation to a city dweller's sense of ownership in their urban landscape. Like New Yorkers, Hiroshige and his fellow Edoites were savvy, maybe a little jaded, but still hometown proud, ready to share their opinions, whether it's about the best place to see wisteria or the street vendor with the best noodles. Returning to my own early reactions to the prints, one of my greatest challenges when I first saw them was processing that these are depictions of a city. With so much greenery and open space, the designs make Edo look like a bit of a backwater or maybe a resort town. But in Hiroshige's time, Edo was one of the 3 most populated cities in the world, competing with London and Beijing. Edo had roughly 1 million inhabitants. So where are all those people? A few of the prints hint at buzzy urban life, and the print on the right offers a view of rooftops that shows just how densely built up some part of the town were. But the truth is that much of Edo was not densely built up, because so much land had been granted to the shogun's retainers and to the daimyos who had to cycle through. The leftover areas available for commoners to live in were extremely limited. 60% of the population lived on 16% of the land. Hiroshige does not show us the networks of narrow alleyways where commoners had their tiny homes. Most of his images focus on the other 84% of the land. Some of Hiroshige's verdant views were in fact well out of town, reachable as a day trip destination. But a fair number are in town. When we see people enjoying seasonal blossoms or autumn leaves, they're often doing so on temple or shrine land, which was nicely landscaped and open to the public, at least seasonally. The mini Fuji that we see on the right was an exception, built by one of the shogun's retainers on his own land. But notice that there are picnic tables up front. Almost all of these places accommodated recreation as well as spiritual pursuits. So we get so much greenery in these prints because Hiroshige was not depicting the everyday grind of working Edo. He was instead depicting the fun places in and around the city where one could escape the rat race and get a breath of fresh air. So I then chose these two quirky designs because they address my last question about the series, and that's about water. Stretches of water appear in the vast majority of the designs. From my many trips to Tokyo, I know that a person can zip all over the city without seeing any water, except maybe the moat around the Imperial Palace. So where did all this water go? In Hiroshige's time, water was central to city life. The bay, rivers, and canals were the way to get around, faster and less dusty than the city's narrow roads. If you wanted to travel any distance or deliver anything in Edo, you took a boat as far as you could, and then you walked. For Hiroshige's contemporaries, then, the view on the left was very familiar. The view on the right, on the other hand, was considerably less common because carts, as we see here truncated, carts were not a particularly good way to take things through the city. Henry Smith notes that there are very few wheeled vehicles depicted in the 118 prints. Soon after the completion of the set, Meiji period modernization began to introduce wider streets, trams, and trains. People and workplaces moved into Western neighborhoods like Shinjuku and Shibuya, far from the banks of the Sumida River. People and workplaces turned their back on the water. Water became the periphery rather than the center. For the most part, Hiroshige's waterways are still there. They're just not near any of our appointments. In some areas, there is less water because of land reclamation. The area in the Boatman print is now Haneda Airport, and the site of the cart print is now at least a half mile from the shore. In the epilogue section of our show, we compare Hiroshige's Edo to modern Tokyo using photographs of the site. Alex Bueno, the photographer, is our next speaker, and I'll let him speak to his own project. But before I do that, that sounds like a segue, but it's not. I have a couple more quick slides. Before that, I want to note very briefly that we also added objects to the installation. Brooklyn has a great collection of Japanese material culture, which are basically objects handcrafted, but for the kinds of people who appear in the prints. I've selected pieces that are comparable to what you see in the designs or that are related to activity seen in the prints, including picnics and commercial life. And all are designed to really bring Edo out of the frame and into our own space. And now we come to the last part of the show, which is quite exciting. Many of you will know the work of artist Takashi Murakami, who's the leading proponent of a movement that he calls superflat. With his work, Murakami has challenged the line between high and low cultures, examining the hybridity of Japanese pop culture. His work is both unabashedly commercial and surprisingly full of references to Japanese art history, as seen in the Rakan painting at the right. For this project, he has reproduced all 118 of Hiroshige's compositions in various sizes using silk screening to mimic the additive process of woodblock printing. At first glance, and especially in slides where you can't see the scale, and that's why I've added this goofy picture of me in front of one, his new paintings look almost identical to the prints. But in the larger paintings, he has added subtle details that aren't present in the prints because he found that when he blew them up, they were actually too flat, which is ironic given that his style is called super flat. So in these recreations, he has added his own touches of color that are not in the original. And more importantly, he's added texture that looks like brushstrokes or impasto painting. And here I think you can make that out, and instead of bokashi, the ink smears that you see in woodblock prints, he uses bende dots, the commercial printing procedure, to create gradations of color. These are Van Gogh's oil copies of Hiroshige's prints made in 1887. And these are not in the show, unfortunately, but Murakami's copies of these copies are. You may recognize Hiroshige's original compositions from the first two prints I showed in my talk. Murakami has said that he was initially interested in engaging with Hiroshige because he loves thinking about how the prints, Hiroshige's prints, would have blown the minds of people like Van Gogh the first time they saw them. Murakami admits that even though he's Japanese, he grew up knowing about the Edo series. Even though he's Japanese and grew up knowing about the Edo series, part of how he looks at Hiroshige was dictated by Van Gogh and by European modernism. So, he's getting this filtered through the eyes of Europeans as well as directly. He's also exposed to Japanese print aesthetics through manga and anime. So in this process, he's essentially interrogating his own influences. And I have to say that I feel like that texture that he adds to the prints is bringing some Van Gogh into it. They look very much like Van Gogh's brushwork. Finally, knowing that his fans want more than personal reflection from him, Murakami has also added tiny cartoon characters in all the larger paintings. They're joining Hiroshige's Edo. They're joining Hiroshige's citizens, his Edoites, in the green spaces of Edo. And I hope that you'll join us there too. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Joan. This is Amy again. And I am looking forward to returning to the galleries with you when the show opens later this week. We are now ending our program with our final speaker, Alex Bueno, who is joining us from Tokyo. And we're just thrilled that you're able to speak with us about your work and your project. Alex is a project assistant professor at the University of Tokyo's Center for Global Education. He holds a BA in art history from Princeton and an MA and PhD in architecture from Harvard University. He specializes in the cultural history of modernization in architecture, landscape architecture, and urban planning, with a recent study, Design as Cultural Representations, Visuality and Materiality in Post-War Japan, that was published in March 2022 in the Review of Japanese Culture and Society. Alex today will introduce his extraordinary project that is featured in the exhibition. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much, Amy, and all of you for coming together online to listen to us today. There's not much time left, so I'll try to introduce my project as quickly as possible so that I might try to say something meaningful about some of them. It's very early in the morning here. I speak to you from the distant future of Thursday, and classes here start tomorrow. But I'm happy to be here. Anyway, when I was here on doctoral research, which started from looking at the idea of places in Tokyo at the end of the 20th century, similar in a way that Hiroshige did in Edo, I took it upon myself to start photographing the series out of a desire to just photograph something in Tokyo. I, I started to realize that I started photography well before I studied architecture and art and so on. I studied architecture. Sorry. I studied photography with others, including Andrew Moore at Princeton, whose style might be somewhat close to mine, although I don't reach his levels of perfection. He did a great book on Cuba, which is where my family comes from, actually, and one on New York, and Robert Moses, which was edited by Hilary Ballin and Kenneth Jackson. It's interesting to look at. Anyway, the idea to photograph the 119 views is not original by any means. It's a participation in the centripetal and repetitive culture surrounding it, as previous speakers have mentioned. There's just something about this series that's driven many people to reproduce it, not the least of whom are Van Gogh and most recently Takashi Murakami. My task has been to take the sites in the series in conditions as close as possible to the original prints. So the time of day, the weather, the season, whether they're blossoming flowers, and so on, while trying to make interesting landscape photographs. These photos, for me, are about a great deal of many things, not the least of which is love for this masterwork by Hiroshige, but the idea of landscape, finding beauty in this everyday nothing that surrounds us here in this great big city, how to compose a landscape, particularly in vertical orientation, which is opposite to the Western tradition, obviously coming from China. Understanding Hiroshige's influence in photographic composition, which is something that Henry has written about quite extensively, and so on, lots of other things. Not to give myself any delusions of grandeur or an impossibly high standard to meet with my photographs that I will show you quite soon. This project is, for me, sort of variations on a theme, as maybe someone like Beethoven often did. I don't want to copy Hiroshige in the view, in each view, but I hope that there are hints of the themes that he uses throughout the series that viewers might find in looking at my photographs. These are not my photographs. This is Google Street View. But as it's already been shown before, and I just showed you, Umeyashiki at Kameido. If you go there today, you'll find this little mall a short walk north of the station. It's a little hard to read on the right picture, but it says Fukatsu, boldly claiming to have revived what I imagine is the glory in the famous print that you probably will not find here. Oh, picture's out of the order. That's the photograph. Oh, I don't have it. There it is. Sorry. Going back to the Taisho period, in 1919, this seems to be the first series of photographic reproductions showing the site and the famous Garyubai, the sleeping dragon tree, which is not in this photograph, that was recently lost at the time due to flooding. This series documents the whole series. Sorry. Apparently a copy of this is on display in Brooklyn. This is one of the sites that I photographed the most. I really like Ume. They're just beautiful trees to look at and to really compose in an image. I still feel like I need to work on this photograph because there's this one and the Kamata plum image. They both have red skies. And to me, I feel like there's something special about these that he wants to show, and I'm not quite sure how to respond to it in photography. This site at Kameido does not have a park today like Kamata. It only has a few commemorative markers, which you see in the bottom right of my photograph. And in what is a long line of sakura, of Someyoshino, along the canal here that is opposite the view that I'm looking at. There are a few plums here, but there's not really much that stands out nearly as spectacularly as in the print. This is the camera that I use, by the way. Last weekend, I was in Kyoto at Hozukyo, and a butterfly became absolutely enamored with my photograph, so much that I missed the light for a picture I was trying to take. Maybe for someone Henry's age, it doesn't feel like an extremely old-fashioned thing to use to make pictures, but it is. It's probably closer to what was used in the Taisho period to take the photograph I just showed than just about anything else. That, I imagine, used dry glass plate for negatives, not film. I used film, which you see on the right. This is a wasted sheet of 4x5 inch film. Color Kodak, which now today over here approaches 10 times the cost as when I started. So this is quite a significant loss that you're looking at here. Fuji sadly stopped making my favorite black and white film a few years ago. Anyway, another site. I suppose if I don't tell you where this is, even Henry would have difficulty identifying it. But surely it is quite identifiable in reproduction, imitation, as you see here, the famous Tsuki no Misaki. I like Henry's way of calling it a place of entertainment. On the left, Emily Allchurch has put more stuff in it, like as Henry reminded us, the book. I wonder if it's because she thought also that Hiroshige's print was too flat when it was enlarged, just like Murakami said, so she had to add these details. This is a light box, like he showed in his image, probably about 1 meter tall. So not as big as Murakami's, but still quite large. These are less known works, but in other reproductions of the series, probably more recognizable in terms of place. This is Shinagawa. Both of these are closer to the new station, the new JR Yamanote line, Takanawa, with the stupid gateway added to it, but recognizable, I imagine. If one locates these on a map, the pink is mine, which I'll show you in a moment. Then the other three I've located here. You can see they're not in the same place. The railway that runs through this is where the coastline used to be. That's why it was convenient here to run the first train between Shimbashi and Yokohama in 1872. So the photograph showing the print showing the bay makes sense. When this place of entertainment, where this place of entertainment was, is not actually known today, and there are two sources that seem to conflict with each other, which is the result of this divergence. The northern spot is close to Sengakuji, and that is very close to where this print with the dogs and the cart wheel was. And so I think it's strange that he would have included in the same season an image from pretty much the same location. So I think probably the southern location is where this was. This is my most recent photograph of this place. I like these challenging, ambiguous sites because they give you possibilities, and I have to go back multiple times to try different locations and see what kind of images I can get. In looking at this, I don't want to sort of force into existence some sort of fantasy that I'm drawing from the prints about the Edo period out of some desire to mimic it. But looking at the angles in the prints and the flatness of the green plain of tatami and extending out into the ocean made me think of this, what you're looking at in the photograph is the plastic barrier that's attached to the overhead walkway. And I like to think that this is a kind of response to his print that makes the familiar scene that, this kind of thing is all over Tokyo, to look at it in a new and sort of strange way. Though I'm not sure this is something that one can succeed in today in the age of Instagram and just overflowing images. Anyway, moving on. I recently noticed, looking at this on Google Map, before going to Kuramaebashi, which is the bridge here, shown to take a picture. Google decided to show this particular locator, which is kind of hard to read, but it's telling us that there's a marker here for Hiroshige's view of Kinryuzan, which is Sensoji in Asakusa, which is not here. I don't know why there's a marker here for it. There are 3 of them commemorating ukiyo-e, but it's very clearly not the right place. But still, it shows us that there's this continued interest in the city in locating them and looking at these views. Here are 3 other versions of this view, 2 from series that I've already shown you. The one on the left actually is old enough that you can still see a glimpse of the temple in between the buildings from the opposite bank of the Sumida. The middle one is more recent and overlays part of the original print. The rightmost photograph very cleverly imitates the composition of Hiroshige's print, but this is not, in fact, the Sumida. This is one of the moats around the palace, I think. And this is my one of my photographs of this. Well, I still think I can take a better picture of this. I have to say, it took me very many times visiting to try and get the wind to blow up the petals from all of the sakura that line the river here, to get them to fill the frame. And I'm sorry, it's probably quite difficult to see over Zoom, but it's just absolutely filled with petals. This photograph shows a particular feature of the kind of camera that I use, which is known as movements in large format cameras. The lens is swung here on the vertical axis to shift the plane of focus into the image to align with the railing, rather than perpendicular to the line of sight, which is what a typical camera does. You can't move these things in a normal camera. The temple here is completely out of sight. That would be out of focus the way I took this picture. And I don't actually think it's visible anymore. All right. To close, one more image. And this, I would say, is not really a famous place. It's not the subject from the inventory of a town airport's postcard rack, as someone described in talking about ukiyo-e. It's just a place with a name. In the Edo period and today, this is looking out from Tokyo towards Saitama, Akabane on the Tokyo side, and Kawaguchi on the opposite side. There is the temple. It's still there today, peeking out from behind the highway pillar in my photograph. But there's really not much here. I would say that I might say this is a place that I myself would not have gone to were I not trying to take this view, but that's actually not true. This is actually quite a nice place. It is a really nice place to escape the city, right along the edges of it. And I think that was true in the Edo period as well. The curvature of this river that Hiroshige distorts so dramatically is something that cannot be imitated in photography, because the river, not only has it been straightened and lined with concrete in modern times, but I can't bend the fabric of space. But if I go back to this photograph of mine, I like to think that I'm sort of imitating the lines that he uses in his prints with this railing going up to the highway in the top left. So I'm thinking of the series altogether, trying to learn how he composes images and landscapes rather than individually looking at these works. I'd love to show more images, but we're over time, and I'd just like to say that in closing, I started this in 2011, so it's been quite some time, incidentally, right before the earthquake. I can't say how many I have good photographs of, but there are quite a lot of difficult ones that I'm continually looking for new opportunities to do. I'd like to give my deepest thanks in particular to Henry, who's been pushing me to do this, to keep doing it and get it out there for some time. I'm very happy if you can enjoy looking at my images in Brooklyn, which are none of the ones that I've shown you today. I'm also working on an exhibition in Kyoto at the end of the year at Koge Seinei Daigaku that will include my new photographs of an earlier series by Hiroshige of famous places in Kyoto. It's been very interesting to look at this because it's clear that his approach to landscapes changed quite dramatically throughout his life. So thank you all for listening, and to Amy and the rest for inviting me to speak.
To everyone. And I hope that we can bring our 3 speakers to join me. Today, we did not want to interrupt you because you all added so much to our understanding of this series, to our appreciation of Tokyo, to our real admiration for those people who worked on this set with us to bring it to life. And we will enjoy returning to Tokyo and Kyoto, hopefully next year, to see Alex's show. I hope that many of you who joined us today will tell your friends and come out to the Brooklyn Museum to see the exhibition. As you know, as JASA members, that there will be an in-person tour of the exhibition with Joan Cummins on April 18th. And we're thrilled about that. I think a reminder will come out at just at this minute, and you'll have it on your computer. I'm sure you will want to join us for our next JASA Zoom on Monday, May 13th, with Andreas Marx, the Mary Grigsburg Curator of Japanese and Korean Art and Director of the Clark Center at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, who will discuss his expansive study of Hiroshige's 100 Famous Views of Edo Deluxe Editions. With that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers, and thanks to our audience, and good night.